What's up everybody and welcome back. We have an awesome new Switch 2 video today, and first of all I want to thank all of you who came out to my 3.5 hour Switch 2 live stream. We covered Metroid Prime 4, all the Switch 2 specs and the pricing and all that good stuff, and a big Q&A. So if you haven't checked that out yet, it is the pinned video on the channel. Please go check that out. But for today's video, we have a really fun topic, and of course that has to do with the Nintendo Switch 2 graphics. And a lot of people are talking about the Switch 2 right now and how impressed they are, actually, especially Nintendo fans. I think Nintendo fans were not expecting to be blown away by some of the ports that they're seeing on the Switch 2, like Cyberpunk 2077, Street Fighter 6, Final Fantasy 7 Remake Intergrade, and so forth. A lot of games look really good on the Switch 2, and this has been something we've been discussing for nearly 2 years now, at least, in detail about what we could expect realistically from the Nintendo Switch 2. We've been doing live streams like we did last Saturday for the last few years, kind of speculating and wondering what we could expect from Nintendo's next-gen console. And now that we've seen it, people are actually more surprised and maybe even caught off guard, especially the Xbox Series S fan base or community. They were quite caught off guard because you may or may not recall, but back in 2023-2024 time range, people were discussing the rumored specs of Switch 2, and many were saying that you could expect possibly an Xbox Series S level of performance or graphics from Switch 2, and this was laughed at by that community. The Xbox community was laughing, saying that you're never going to get a Nintendo console that is going to be able to match up with Xbox Series S. It's impossible to have that level of power and performance in a portable device. And like we said, we talked about it for quite a long time on this channel about how the different architectures, how NVIDIA is different than AMD, and how DLSS is far, far better than FSR. We talked about it at length. And to go along with that, we also talked about how poorly the Xbox Series S was designed and problems the Xbox Series S had. And we're going to dive deeper into some possible new information that you haven't seen yet. So make sure you stay tuned for that later in the video for that technical example. But here we have Street Fighter 6 on the Xbox Series S versus the Nintendo Switch 2. And we talked about this at length in my live stream, but we have some interesting information here that we're going to discuss that you might find kind of funny, but also interesting as well. But Xbox Series S port of Street Fighter 6 has lacking texture detail versus the Nintendo Switch 2 version. This is factually better and higher detail and fidelity than the Xbox Series S. The Xbox Series S is known for having a RAM issue for graphics, but many people brought out after the fact that the Xbox Series S version of Street Fighter 6 has a graphical bug that prevents certain textures from loading that Capcom never fixed. But we will show you an example of this port a little bit later in this video about why the Switch 2 version of Street Fighter 6 still looks better, even with the modification that some people did. The Xbox Series S version of Street Fighter 6, they got the textures to actually load in again. They fixed it themselves since Capcom never did it. But we're going to show you an example of why the Nintendo Switch 2 version actually still looks better than the Xbox Series S version, even in its fixed graphical state. But first of all, I want to go over some of these comments people made because they really were not expecting this. And I was being accused of basically being a Nintendo fanboy and attacking the Xbox community for just posting the truth about how this port looks. And keep in mind, I don't engage in that fanboy activity. I don't attack others, but I want to show you just how angry the Xbox community got seeing this example. Here's some of the replies. Congrats on the new, more expensive console, have more power than the ancient Series S hardware. Now it's ancient. Just before it was impossible. You're never going to get a portable to run an Xbox Series S level game. Now we've seen a lot of these responses saying, well, of course it should run better. It's a newer piece of hardware. It's going to cost twice as much. Let me know when Switch 2 can run Call of Duty Warzone at 100 frames per second. The Xbox Series S can. They start bringing up other games, right? I'm playing it on PS5, so it destroys both. Of course it does, but not really, to be honest with you. Show me Cyberpunk 2077 load times. Xbox Series S has Street Fighter 6 texture bug. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. It doesn't matter. You'll see. Some people were very happy, of course, with the result, but a lot of angry Xbox Series S community members coming in here. And then, of course, bring up the price, but That is not the topic. The topic is actual performance and graphics being better in this version of the game. That's really all that I was talking about and posting. You can't use Street Fighter 6 as an example. Series S port is shoddy. Yeah, okay. But then you go into the quote tweets. And of course, they bring up Cyberpunk 2077 when I'm talking about Street Fighter 6. That's how you know they're threatened, right? And they bring up Cyberpunk 2077 from a cutscene that is from an unfinished game that has nothing to do with Street Fighter 6 on the Switch 2. Yeah. And we'll go down a bit here, down a bit here. People are angry. People are impressed. Breaking news, the price is more, so that means it's better. And let's see, what else people are saying here. Wow, Nintendo fanboys taking a dump on the Series S. No, this is not a Nintendo fanboy doing that. This is just somebody showing a difference of the game. That's it. I didn't say anything bad about the system here. Just that the fact that it would outperform Series S on certain aspects most likely. Trigger warning, this is going to upset people. So the Switch 2 is better than a potato. Yeah, see, now that like we said, now the Xbox Series S is no good. You know, as soon as a Nintendo console is better than an Xbox console, oh, you know, don't worry about that. That console is just garbage. Or don't compare that port. That port doesn't count. But remember, guys, this console is not even released yet. So yeah, the comments go on and on and on, and you guys are upset. We struck the hornet's nest, basically. So, you know, but to be honest with you, a lot of people are actually very happy. The majority of them are actually. If you go, I mean, the tweet got a lot of attention, nearly 3,000 likes. So, of course, the Nintendo fan base is very, very happy with this. It's really the Xbox community that's upset or defensive, and they want to bring up other things that are not related to this game. And remember, this video comes from Switch Played, and I'll leave the link in the description. But there's another comparison video out there that someone else did, and I'll leave the link in the description for that as well. And this comes from YouTube channel Elena Lista de Bits. They're a very good YouTube channel that does a lot of comparison videos, and they did actually a comparison video of the fixed graphics version of the Xbox Series S that fans did, and the debugged version that we showed here versus Switch 2. Because people were saying, well, you can't count that port because, you know, that is a broken port. The textures are not loading, as you can see here. Textures are not loading fully, but the fixed version does. So the interesting thing is, though, if you look at the Switch 2 version versus the Xbox Series S fixed graphics version and the bugged graphics version, it doesn't matter. The Switch 2 version actually is higher resolution. You look closely here how blurry that is and pixelated. You can see the draggies, and you zoom in right here. The Switch 2 version is running at a higher resolution, or if it's not running at a higher resolution, it is actually fixed the jaggies due to possibly DLSS, like we suspect. We talked about line correction in the background in the live stream we did about Street Fighter 6. There's some buildings that they had that look very smooth on the Switch 2 version and sharp. So if it's not running at a higher resolution, it is probably using DLSS to upscale and fix all those image issues with like pixelation and stair stepping that the Xbox Series S version has, no matter which version you're using here. You need to do some special tricks, and takes quite a bit of effort, I guess, from what I heard, to mod this game to make it work correctly on Xbox Series S, and 99.9% of people who own this are never going to do that. So this is like an outlier, but it's a good example to show that actually this is still better looking on Switch 2. That's not the only example, though. We're going to go a little farther here. Yep. So Switch 2, fixed graphics version, and the bugged version. And Switch 2 does look sharper. And we're going to talk about the skin here as well. Many people were saying that the skin is more detailed on the Switch 2, and it may appear that way actually. But that may not actually be the case, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But going on here, you know, basically we can see there's more detail in the Switch 2 version. Let's take a look at a three-way comparison between this area here. You got Luke, you got this other background. You can see very clearly there's more texture detail on this background train car, basically. In this level here, it's more blurry and less detailed here on the Xbox Series S version, in either version they use. the default or the fixed graphics version. There's more texture detail in the pole even. There's more texture detail on the wall. There's more texture detail on the ground. You see on the grass there, it has finer details. It's just more detailed overall. So yeah, this looks quite a bit better on the Switch 2, no matter which version they're using here. So again, I'm going to leave the links in the description, but I want to make sure that was clear that it doesn't matter, you know, what's going on here. The actual Switch 2 version of Street Fighter 6 does in fact look better. You can see here, Street Fighter 6 Switch 2. We were talking about this on our live stream. This background right here that I'm putting my cursor on has cleaned up the lines significantly versus the Xbox Series S version. It's just cleaner, sharper, looks a lot better, and most likely, like we talked about, it's probably DLSS that's doing that, it's helping with that. You see that it's more jaggy in Xbox Series S, more clean a Switch 2. So there you go. Now, we were talking about how people were bringing out, wow, you know, the Switch 2 version even has more detailed faces. But there's a very interesting thing that I discovered that most likely is the case here, and which actually saves GPU resources, is that most likely the Switch 2 version of Street Fighter 6 is running the game with the graphical effect called subsurface scattering for the skin turned off. And this is something you don't see in the console versions of the game in the options. You can't go into the options menu and turn that off or on because it's a set thing they got to bake in when they develop the game. So when you go into the options for the PC version, if you turn subsurface scattering off, it makes the skin more coarse, that you can see all the pores and everything, and a little bit less realistic in terms of how it reflects light and other materials like water and sweat and things like that. So the Switch 2 version, it does appear to possibly have subsurface scattering turned off, which in the tech world could be seen as a graphical downgrade, since skin doesn't really look so hard and coarse like that in real life. It's more smooth. You still have pores and everything, but they're not so, you know, readily apparent. Granted, I could see at a distance, it could actually look like it's more detailed, right? And of course, in a fighting game, you're not going to be up close with these characters' faces or their skin. It's only in those big level 3 supers where you see those close-up shots of them. Now, I'll give you an example of what it looks like on the PC with it turned off and turned on, and you'll see that there's more coarse pores in the face skin of Ryu, and that's just simply not quite as realistic as what real skin would be, which is why subsurface scattering will blend kind of that together. You'll still have pores in the skin, but they won't be quite as coarse as they are with it turned off. It's really a minor detail to argue about, really, but it does actually save GPU power. From what I researched, it does cost, of course, something on the GPU to use that, so most likely if it's turned off on the Switch 2 version of Street Fighter 6, it's going to help with other things, with the resolution and frame rate and what have you. Even just a little bit, every bit counts for these ports, right? So I thought that was very interesting, and possibly why people assumed it was simply just higher detail, because this actually looks different than the PS5 version. The PS5 version has the same smooth skin look, because most likely, just like the PC version, it's using subsurface scattering on the skin, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So yeah, that's the latest on the graphics situation for Switch 2. The Xbox community is kind of upset right now, seeing that the Switch 2 could possibly be outperforming the Xbox Series S in certain things. And remember, we're going to be having Digital Foundry causing quite a bit of stir in the Nintendo community with the Switch 2, because they're going to be comparing the Switch 2 to the PS4, Xbox Series S, PS5, all these consoles, and already people are questioning some of the actions that they're taking with the Switch 2, that is Digital Foundry, especially with their recent comparison, the PS4 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake versus the Switch 2 version of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Many people question why they did that, because the PS5 version is what the Switch 2 version is based on. They should be comparing that and not the PS4 version, because it does factually look different with its graphics. Switch 2 version is based on the PS5 and PC version. Plus, speaking of Digital Foundry, they did bring out today on their podcast that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond on the Switch 2 is in fact running at native 4K resolution and 60 frames per second, which is something that Nintendo has been making a big deal about themselves before they even said something, of course. Nintendo, that is, has been advertising Metroid Prime 4 to run at 4K at 60 frames per second, and then 1080p 120 frames per second on Switch 2. And it's been all over their marketing, it's been all over their trailers that, making it very clear Metroid Prime 4 is 4K 60 docked or 1080p 120 frames per second docked. But people are questioning if Nintendo was lying, so we got pixel counters out there. Digital Foundry, who did say that it is running at 4K 60 native. So yeah, that is impressive. But like I said before in my previous Metroid Prime 4 coverage, I could tell already it was running at 4K native. I have a 4K display that I watched it on. I have a 4K monitor, and you could really tell that Metroid Prime 4 is running at maximum resolution. It looks absolutely gorgeous. And Nintendo rarely brings out those numbers. They rarely ever talk about resolution and frame rate in their game releases. But this game, Metroid Prime 4, they made it very, very clear so many times, multiple times, of what the resolution is. So since the very beginning, I pretty much knew that this was going to be 4K resolution, which is over 4 times the pixel density of Metroid Prime 4 on the Nintendo Switch original version, which is running at 900p. It's far, far more enhanced in terms of resolution, and it does have increased lighting and textures as well. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and it's actually really a great way to show the power gap between Switch 2 and Switch 1. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this one. If you did enjoy this content, please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.